Welcome back, everyone. We've got a really interesting deep dive teed up for you today, all about drones.
Should be fascinating.
You guys send in such a cool mix of sources, too.
Yeah, definitely not your typical drone stuff.
Exactly. So we've got a YouTube press conference, a couple of really in-depth scholarly articles, and even a podcast episode.
Seems like you're interested in way more than just how drones work.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We're going to be talking about drones and warfare.
The ethical
The
questions.
psychological impacts.
The whole shebang.
So yeah, let's just jump right in. This whole thing about mysterious drones off the coast of New Jersey, I mean, have you seen this?
Oh, yeah, that press conference, right?
Yeah. The
Yeah.
officials are calling it a massive drone invasion. I mean,
Over 50 drones at once flying in formation.
wild.
It's not just like some kids messing around,
No, not at all. Even the military personnel at Naval Weapons Station Arl.
Yeah, that's definitely not your average hobbyist drone.
And get this, they sometimes fly with their lights on.
Almost like they want to be seen.
Spooky, right.
It's very strange, yeah. It makes you wonder what's really going on.
And who's behind it all?
Well, Congressman Smith seems to think it could be foreign adversaries, you know?
Like Russia? Or China?
Right. He even brought up the war in Ukraine, how important drones are over there.
Do you think he's right? I mean, could this be some kind of Cold War thing playing out in the skies over Jersey?
I don't know. It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely raises some questions.
Yeah, big time. Like, how do we even tell the difference between, someone just flying a drone for fun and an actual threat?
Especially with this technology getting more and more sophisticated all the time.
Good point. And that kind of ties into what those scholarly articles were talking about.
About how drones are changing the way we fight wars.
Yeah, like soldiers aren't even on the battlefield anymore. It's all remote.
Right, so it's safer for the soldiers in some ways.
But then you've got these drone operators just watching their targets on a screen
Sometimes for days, even weeks.
before they actually strike.
Yeah, one of the articles called it distanced intimacy.
Distanced intimacy. Wow.
Yeah, pretty powerful, right?
Yeah, I mean, how does that even affect them psychologically,
Oh, it definitely takes a toll. They talk about a kind of moral injury.
Oral injury.
Yeah, because they're experiencing war, but it's through a screen.
So it's real, but it's not.
Exactly. There's this disconnect between the drone control room.
And the actual consequences of their actions.
Right, and then there's the impact on the civilians living under constant drone surveillance.
Oh, man. Yeah, one article described it as like a wave of terror.
Always looking over their shoulder, wondering when the next attack might come.
That's heavy.
And then you add artificial intelligence into the mix.
Things get even more complex.
Absolutely, because now we're talking about drones that can basically think for themselves.
Like in that YouTube video you sent?
With the kill cloud,
Yeah, what was that drone they mentioned?
the Skywalker long-range ready-to-fly drone.
Right, right. So the idea is that these AI algorithms could actually be making life or death decisions.
Without any human intervention.
That's kind of terrifying, isn't it? Like, we're not talking about remote control anymore.
No, this is something totally different. It changes the whole concept of warfare.
And speaking of scary, I mean, if we go back to those New Jersey drone sightings,
We don't even know who's controlling those things.
how can we possibly understand their behavior?
Or hold anyone accountable.
It really highlights that lack of transparency and accountability.
Which was something that came up a lot in that podcast episode.
And the articles, too.
Yeah, everyone's saying that the laws and ethical frameworks just haven't caught up with the technology.
So we're basically playing catch-up while the drones keep getting more and more advanced.
Exactly, it's a problem, that's for sure.
And then there's this whole other issue of targeted killings, like that case with Anwar al-Awlaki.
The American citizen killed in Yemen.
Right, by a U.S. drone strike.
It sparked a huge debate about the legality of that kind of thing.
Especially when it involves citizens.
And it raises a really fundamental question, like, where do we draw the line?
What are the limits of acceptable force in this new world of drone warfare?
Big questions, for sure.
Yeah, and we're just scratching the surface here, but maybe this is a good place to take a quick break.
Yeah, catch our breath.
We've covered a lot of ground already. Those drone sightings, the changing face of warfare, the ethical dilemmas.
Definitely a lot to unpack.
But we're not done yet.
That case with Anwar al-Awlaki, man, that one really gets to the heart of it.
Yeah, how do we even apply our old ideas about, like, due process and all that?
And this new world, right?
It's like trying to play a video game with the rules of chess.
I like that. And, it's not just theoretical. These dilemmas are impacting real people.
Yeah, especially those drone operators.
That podcast episode, the interviews with those former operators,
Chilling, really.
talk about pressure, making those decisions,
Based on grainy footage sometimes.
and intel that might not even be complete.
Right.
It really brings it home, those personal accounts.
Totally. Like, we can read about PTSD and moral injury, but hearing those stories,
It hits differently.
did any of them really stick with you?
One guy, he was talking about how, he'd have to track a target for weeks.
Weeks.
Yeah, watching their daily routines, almost getting to know them, but through a camera
And then having to make the call.
to engage.
Yeah. Distanced intimacy thing.
It messes with your head, I think.
Totally. Knowing you're ending someone's life.
Yeah.
Even from so far away.
And it's not just about taking a life, it's that constant possibility of making a mistake.
What if the intel is wrong?
Right. Or there's collateral damage.
Those are heavy burdens to carry.
And then you have this whole culture of, not talking about mental health in the military.
Makes it that much harder to seek help.
That's where groups like Veterans for Peace come in.
The Drone Whistleblower League, too.
Right? Providing support for operators who are struggling, pushing for more transparency.
Really important work, especially since we know drone use is only going to increase.
It's too versatile a technology, and let's face it, it's politically convenient.
Nobody wants to risk putting boots on the ground if they don't have to.
Exactly. So the genie's out of the bottle, basically.
But then doesn't that make advocacy even harder? I mean, how do you even begin to set ethical boundaries?
When the technology is changing so fast, yeah.
Like, by the time you figure out the rules, the game has already changed again.
Right. But the articles did offer some solutions.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, a lot of legal experts were saying we need a clearer international legal framework.
So like an update to the rules of war for the drone age.
Exactly. Something that specifically addresses things like targeted killings,
Proportionality of force.
accountability.
It makes sense. But is that even realistic? Can international law really keep up with all this?
It's a huge challenge, for sure, but I do think it's necessary.
Otherwise, it's just a free-for-all.
Right, and that brings us back to those New Jersey drones.
Unidentified, flying around in U.S. airspace.
No accountability, no one even knows who's behind it.
It really underscores how drones are blurring all these lines we used to take for granted.
Between peacetime and war.
Between military and civilian.
That's a key takeaway from the sources, I think. This isn't just about the battlefield anymore.
Yeah, drones are everywhere now.
Delivering packages, monitoring crops.
Spying on our neighbors.
Well, maybe not that yet, but you see what I mean.
Oh, yeah, got
It's
ya.
like we're trying to figure out the rules for drone warfare.
At the same time that we're figuring out the rules for drones in our own backyard.
It's a lot, that's for sure.
And we're still just at the beginning, right?
Right.
Like the technology itself is still developing.
Who knows what drones will be capable of in 5 years, 10 years?
It's kind of exciting in a way,
Oh, definitely. It feels like we're on the verge of a whole new era.
but it's scary too, right?
Absolutely. The potential is there for incredible good, but also for real harm.
You know, one article called Drones a Mirror, reflecting back our own values and anxieties.
Interesting.
Like, the technology itself isn't inherently good or bad.
It's how we choose to use it.
That's where the real challenge lies.
So it's not just about regulating the drones, it's about regulating ourselves.
Figuring out what kind of future we want to live in.
And those choices have consequences for us and for the generations that come after us.
Big stuff.
Yeah, no doubt.
Well, this seems like a good place to shift gears a bit.
Here's the final part of our deep dive.
We've talked about the impact on warfare, the ethical concerns, the growing presence of drones in everyday life.
But the big question remains.
Where do we go from here? You know, it's funny, we keep coming back to those drone sightings in New Jersey.
Yeah, it's like they've become this symbol for
For the whole drone thing, right?
yeah, all that uncertainty,
It started as this local news story, but it's really gotten us thinking about the bigger picture.
totally, here's this advanced technology flying around right over our heads.
And we don't even know who's in control,
What their motives are.
what it means for our security, our privacy.
It's like a real-life X-Files episode,
So instead of aliens, it's drones.
Ah, exactly.
And those questions are just going to get more and more relevant as drones become more common in everyday life.
One of the articles actually compared drones to cars, in the early days.
Oh, interesting.
At first, cars were just this novelty, right?
A rich person's toy.
But then they changed everything. Transportation, cities, even how we socialize.
So you're saying drones are going to be like that?
It's possible. We're definitely at a turning point.
Like, we see the potential, but we're still figuring out the rules of the road.
Exactly. And Just like with cars, there will be bumps along the way,
Accidents,
misuse.
unforeseen consequences.
But there will also be incredible advancements, things we can't even fathom right now.
One of the sources mentioned drones being used for package delivery,
Search and rescue.
disaster relief.
The possibilities are pretty amazing when you think about it.
Ugh, like drones delivering groceries.
Helping firefighters find people in a burning building.
Wow.
It could really improve efficiency, safety, even save lives.
But like you said, we have to be cautious too, right?
Of course, those benefits come with risks.
Like what?
Well, one article talked about the potential for increased surveillance.
And the erosion of privacy.
Imagine drones constantly watching our streets, collecting data on us.
Maybe even using facial recognition.
It's a slippery slope when you start thinking about it.
It sounds like we're trying to walk this fine line,
Between all the amazing possibilities.
and some pretty dystopian outcomes.
So the question is, how do we find that balance? How do we harness this technology?
Without sacrificing our values.
That's the big question.
And I don't know if there's an easy answer.
There isn't, but the sources did offer some solutions.
Like what?
Well, one common thread was the need for strong regulations,
Makes sense. Regulations that address safety, privacy, accountability.
like the FAA for airplanes, but for drones.
All right, so we need rules about who can fly them, where they can fly them.
What data they can collect, who's liable if something goes wrong.
But is that enough? I mean, regulations can only go so far.
You're right, we also need a broader conversation about the role of drones in society.
Like, as a society, what are our limits? How much surveillance are we willing to accept?
How do we balance security with privacy?
And what about these autonomous drones? Where do we draw the line with AI?
Those are questions we all need to be thinking about.
So we all need to get more informed, more engaged.
That podcast episode made a great point about the importance of public awareness.
We can't just leave these decisions to the tech companies and the government.
We need to demand transparency, accountability.
A future where drones are used ethically, responsibly. So what can we do? Where do we even start?
Just staying informed is a good first step,
Read articles, listen to podcasts.
Engage in these conversations.
The more we understand this technology,
The better we'll be able to advocate for its responsible use.
it's like we're all becoming drone pilots in a way.
Navigating this uncharted territory, trying to chart a course for the future.
And just like pilots, we need to stay alert, aware of the risks.
But also open to the possibilities.
I think that's a great analogy.
We're all in the cockpit now.
And the choices we make today will shape the future of this technology.
It's a daunting responsibility, but it's also an exciting time.
Well, you've definitely given us a lot to think about.
My pleasure. I hope it's been informative.
And a little bit thought-provoking, too.
Definitely.
We'll be sure to include links to all the source material in the show notes.
So you can explore these issues further on your own.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us, everyone.
Until next time.
Stay curious.